Are we back? Are we here? Yeah, that was OBS crashing. That's the first time OBS has actually ever crashed and given me a notice that it was crashing. So thanks OBS for crashing right off the bat. Very helpful. Really appreciate that. All right. Well, I mean, I guess we can do what we can do, right? I just got censored for saying Malifornication. It's the edge of the world. Yeah. All right. Enough of that. And OBS. And now I shall die. Bang. Okay. So we'll just sort of start the VOD right here, and we'll cut off the beginning of that. So welcome, everybody, where I will now be beginning the VOD because OBS just crashed on me. So let's talk about Mali. And to do so, we need to start way back in time when human beings first showed up in Mali. And by the way, this is a very brief overview. We are not going to do the entire, thousands and thousands and millennia and hundreds of thousands of years of history of Mali. We're mostly going to be focusing on the Mali Empire, but to get there, we've got to sort of fast forward a little bit. Humans show up in this area over 100,000 years ago. Africa, of course, is the birthplace of humanity as we know it, and the Western Saharan region, the Savannah region or the Sahel region, is one of the big places where human beings first show up. So, pretty big deal there. And we're going to start seeing physical culture there, which means that we're going to start seeing things like tools and such. But the oldest cities in the area are going to show up around 300 BC. And the oldest of them is going to be this place called Djenné-Djenné. Now, you can actually see this spelled several different ways. If you start looking around on the internet for places, you can see Djenné-Djenné spelled a whole bunch of different ways. But the city itself is one of the oldest cities in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, of course, if you look over in places like Egypt and along the Mediterranean coastline, you're going to find cities that are much, much older. We do have to remember that because of the lower population in sub-Saharan Africa and the just overabundance of natural resources, there is not as much competition inside of sub-Saharan Africa, so our cultures are not going to develop as rapidly. But around 300 or so BC, you're going to start seeing cities pop up. One of the biggest ones that becomes really important for Mali and becomes part of the later the Empire of Mali is going to be Djenné-Djenné. And that actually shows up around 200 BC or so. The archaeology in this area is a little bit questionable. We're not necessarily certain where 100% of all of this stuff is very firmly. Part of the reason is because of the way that the building materials are put together. A lot of them are really big mud brick buildings. Let me show you an example. Well, there's my chat window. Boom. So this is a big building in Djenné-Djenné. Now, this is very, very, very later than the 200 BC period when they first got settled. This would have been from much later, probably around the 1300 AD or CE, if you just would prefer. So this is about 700 or so years old. But we notice here a few things. Most notably, our building materials are pounded and baked earth with sort of wood reinforced pegs and lattice work. So, you don't have necessarily what... Ooh, good gracious. Sorry. You don't have these really, really, really durable stone buildings. So when it does have these big catastrophic rains, it can wash away a lot of that stuff. And especially when some of these older cities get abandoned, the elements play havoc with keeping a lot of these buildings around. So it is sort of hard sometimes to firmly date when a lot of this stuff is archaeologically speaking. There also has not necessarily been an overwhelmingly large amount of interest, archaeologically speaking, which is sort of sad. I really do enjoy the sort of history. I really like Western African history. It's not necessarily one of my specialties, but I always get excited when I have the opportunity to talk about it, either in class or maybe here on stream, because I do feel like it's one of those areas that sort of gets overlooked a lot. And when Mali came up as a topic, I got pretty stoked about it. But because there's not necessarily a lot of what you might consider flashy interest in the region, historically speaking, that means that there's probably not going to be as much archaeology that needs to be done in the area. For a while, and even to a certain extent now, parts of Mali, the modern day country of Mali, and some of the areas around Mali, like especially Burkina Faso and Ghana, have had a lot of issues with violence. Cote d'Ivoire as well, Ivory Coast, if you know it that way, have had some trouble with unstable governments and insurgents and war. There's also been, for the last couple of years, going back to the Obama presidency, there's been a lot of Ebola in the area, so people are not necessarily interested in going over to hang out. Now, there is work that's being done over there, but what I'm trying to say is when budgets get tighter, people are going to go to the places that are going to be kind of sexier when it comes to archaeology. If they cannot date them, you see why Malifornication was one of your conditions. Well, honestly, the biggest comparison, though, is that California, as we understand it in sort of pop culture, is a lot like Mali. For a long time of its history, Mali was the richest place over in the west. It was the coastline. It had all of the fancy people. It had all of the really educated people. It's where a lot of people went looking for cool stuff. There's a lot of comparison, actually, between the modern-day state of California and the ancient empire of Mali. So there's a fairly decent overlap there. eComposer says just a pure random history fact. Okay, pure random history fact. Let's see. Man, that's always so hard sometimes because I have so many just random ones floating around in there. I'm trying to think of one that's regional to Africa here. I'll tip my hand a little bit, and this is not something that I was actually going to share specifically. I did a little bit of research on Mansa Musa, one of the kings of Mali, perhaps the only one that people have actually heard of. And I read a particular article where a historian was trying to estimate, based on detailed descriptions of this particular journey that Mansa Musa went on, how much gold he carried with him on this trip. And his estimate was that Mansa Musa gave away 8 tons of gold over the course of this one trip. So keep that in mind when we get to Mansa Musa, this guy who's fabulously wealthy, is the king of Mali. Pretty cool guy. All right, so, and also welcome, eComposer. I hope you're having a good one. And you call bull. This is why you like playing with encumbrance rules. You're over encumbered. You can no longer run. Well, I mean, he also had this giant retinue with him. All right, let's talk about camels. And we're not talking about Camel cigarettes, by the way. Camels as in the really ugly animal. The thing about camels is that they literally do change this region of Africa. Because this big thing right here is hard to cross, especially when you're trying to cross things with pack animals. Horses do not do well in the Sahara. Cattle that can be used as pack animals don't do very well in the Sahara. I'm camel shaming. I mean, they're ugly and they're mean. I've been around plenty of camels. I know. So why are camels such a big deal for Mali? Well, they show up in this region around 300 AD. And there had been some attempts at making trade routes that crossed the Sahara in the past, but it's not ever really been a stable or lucrative trade.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus. Vern.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus. Cheers, Vern. Many thanks, my friend. And welcome. Eat TJ Camel. Are these stinky camels, perchance? My wife is referring to the old Persian anecdote where you run the stinky camels at the enemy and convince them to run away because of the stench of your camels. I feel like they had a chance to use ostriches instead. Allegedly. Ostriches. But that's at least a 2-man job. Maybe even 3. Unless it was a sick ostrich. Allegedly. And I hope that somebody gets that. If you don't get that, I am sad. And you should go watch Letterkenny, because it's a hilarious TV show. Alright, so camels are really seriously going to change the way that this stuff works. Because when you introduce a camel, you can then start trading across the Sahara. So if we look at our Empire of Mali, now this is a little bit later, after they had expanded quite a bit. So here's actually our city of Janneh. This is Timbuktu, another big city called Gao. What we're looking at here are these trans-Saharan trade routes that are coming all the way over here to Egypt and Ethiopia, that are connecting into Arabia and the northern coast of the Mediterranean. The first company or empire that's going to really make use of these is this group right here, the Empire of Ghana, who is sort of the front-runner state of what later becomes the Empire of Mali. But these trans-Saharan trade routes going up to places like Marrakesh, over here to Kufra or Cairo, these are going to be really, really big deals, and they're going to be lots of money. Lots and lots of money. One hump or two. These are one hump camels. These are not the dromedary camels. I'm sorry, dromedary camels have the one hump. They're not the Bactrian camels that have the 2 humps. I apologize. I got my camels out of order. All right, so when we start trading across the Sahara, that is going to be a really big deal for the people here in Western Africa, because it's going to give them a market for their goods. And they have quite a few goods. They have salt mines, they have iron mines and copper mines, but they also have the good stuff. They have diamonds and they have gold. And the ancient world, of course, loves these things just like modern day people do. And over here in Western Africa, it was so common that it wasn't necessarily the most valuable thing that, you know, they needed, because they actually sort of had a surplus of a lot of this stuff. And at that point, when they find these outlets that are very greedy for their gold, this is going to really rapidly increase the amount of external goods that are coming into this region. And they're going to be bringing in stuff mostly from the Mediterranean world and over here in the Asian world. These are things that are going to be, of course, from cultures that are significantly older and civilizations that are significantly more advanced, which means that you're going to have typically things like finer craftsmanship works. You're also going to have food that comes from foreign places, which, of course, is a big deal. But even stuff like silk that comes all the way over from China. So these are things that are going to start pouring into Western Africa. And this wealth increase is going to be one of the big things that spurs a lot of these people into making centralized states. Because when the money is coming in, everybody wants to be in control of the money, right? It's just sort of a human thing. We all kind of want to be the rich ones. Worm butt thread. I don't follow Bubba, but it's good to see you. I hope you're having a good one. Oh, worm butt thread. Oh, it's silk. Okay, I'm with you now. I was not putting that together. If you all are not already, you should go follow my friend Bubba. He's a great dude who does cartooning and occasionally makes puppets on his stream. He's a really fun guy to hang out and talk with. Has all sorts of really fun characters that he can tell you the backstories of. You should definitely go give Bubba a follow and hang around sometime in his chat. So yeah, these camels are a pretty big deal. This is going to be what sort of kickstarts a lot of this big trade, and by the time we get to about 600 or so, this trans-Saharan trade route is going to be just blowing and going, and it's going to be really, really, really popular. All right. Y'all should have come down to Biloxi a couple weeks ago for Free Comic Book Day. Yeah, Bubba, we with all the crazy stuff going on in COVID land, and with me starting up school, going out of town was something that we needed. If we needed to, what I'm trying to say here, if we were going to go out of town, we needed to go somewhere that was isolated and quiet. So we actually spent some time hanging out, and like actually just hanging out, like, you know, kind of hanging around talking. So, and now I'm back in full out teacher mode. So it is time for all of that to get back going again. This is actually the first full week of the term, and I'm already sort of feeling it. I have had a bit of an upset stomach. That comes from me not sleeping on a regular schedule. It takes a lot for me to get on a sleeping schedule, and waking up early in the morning is just not my thing. If I did not have to wake up early in the morning, that would be so much better. Is that a map of a globe and not flat? Yeah, it's not a flat Earth. This is a globe. Yeah, I'm one of those people that pushes facts and does logic. We're being visited by a puppy. Hello, puppy. Do you all want to see the puppy? She's looking at me like she wants me to call her up. All right. Come here. Come and see me. Come here. It's okay. Come on. Come on. There we go. There's a puppy. Hello. Give me sugars? No? You alright? You smell my tea? Yeah. You okay? Just gonna take a nap. It is about puppy nap time. She usually goes to sleep from about 8 o'clock to about 10 o'clock. So it's getting pretty close to her sleepy time. But you like thinking Africa is small. Darn you, Mercator projection. Africa is tiny compared to Jupiter. Yeah, lots of things are tiny when compared to Jupiter. Ooh, my camera's way off now. There we go. Okay, so Islam. Islam is going to show up in Western Africa around the year 1000 of the Common Era, or AD, whichever one is your abbreviation of choice. And it's going to come down these trade routes, these trans-Saharan trade routes. The Ottoman, not the Ottoman, good gracious, the Umayyad dynasty or caliphate had conquered most of this northern African territory during the 700s and had expanded down here into Egypt, and even before that. The Muslim world had expanded a big way around most of this part of Africa and follows the trade route over here to where all of this gold is coming, and finds a lot of our people over here. And this is actually where we're going to get our first reference to the Kingdom of Mali. There is an African... There is a Muslim historian named Al-Bakr who is technically an Andalusian because he's born in Muslim Spain, but he writes about Africa. So follow that line of thought. But in 1068, he writes a big book about all of his travels down in Africa, and he's the first person that gives us a direct reference to a kingdom that is in Mali, and describes how big it is and how wealthy it is and all of this stuff. So this is going to bring a lot of interest into this area. Of course, Islam at the time is a very expansive religion, and it is big on pushing its expansion into areas where it at the time did not. El Dorado the First. Kind of, sort of. Around this time, we are going to see the first actual real establishment of a place called Timbuktu as a city. And Timbuktu is one of the few cities that I knew about in Africa as a kid, because that's where Garfield was always trying to mail Nermal. When Nermal, the good, loving gray cat, would show up and Garfield would capture her and try to send her away, he would always try to send her to Timbuktu. So I knew of Timbuktu as a very young child. But Timbuktu is actually a really big trading hub, and it sits basically right about here, and it's where several of these big trans-Saharan trade routes meet up, and it's going to be really important for the larger growth of Mali because it's going to be one of their biggest cities. And the location where a lot of places are going to be, or a lot of buildings and important things are going to be built. But there's going to be a problem going around about this time. I mentioned that there is an empire called Ghana, which had been the forerunner of Mali. It was mostly situated right around in here. Now, the modern-day country of Ghana is over here, not necessarily directly beside, but they have a similar ethnic and cultural heritage. But the Empire of Ghana is going to be falling apart around this time. There's another big empire called the Empire of Sasso, and Ghana and Sasso are going to be fighting with each other. And in the middle of this, there's a particular group of people called the Malinke, which is where we get Mali from. I guess I should type this, yeah. Malinke. The Malinke people are going to be the victims of Sasso expansion. However, there is a particular leader amongst one of the tribes of the Malinke, a guy named Sundiata. I guess I should call him Sundiata Keita. And Sundiata Keita is not going to stand for this. He's not going to stand for his Malinke people being conquered by the Sassos, and he is going to lead a rebellion against them. And around 1235 of the Common Era, or AD, he is going to establish the actual first kingdom of Mali. Now, this does not necessarily jive as easily as it might seem with our primary source account, right? So back we just talked about this guy Al-Bakr, who said that there was a kingdom of Mali in 1068. So how is there a kingdom of Mali in 1068 and Sundiata Keita is going to establish the Mali Empire in 1235? That's about 180 or so year different. What's going on here? And the answer is that it's probably a lot more confusing than we actually really understand. One of the ways that Ghana ran some of its imperial stuff was through these kind of proxy kings where they would come and take you over and they would say that you're part of the larger Ghanan empire. Isn't there a story called Sundiata based on an oral tradition? Yes, there is. There's actually an entire kind of epic poem slash historical hero narrative about Sundiata. That's pretty famous, and I mentioned that Mansa Musa might be the only person that you had heard of, but I did not account for people maybe have heard having read the Sundiata epic. Did you read that in Colloquium? Is that one of the things that you all ran across in Colloquium? Ah, you remember that one for Colloquium. Yeah, the Sundiata epic is actually really cool. Here's the thing, though. As you noted, it is based on oral tradition, and it's almost certainly got some embellishment in there. However, it is one of the documents that gets used quite a bit to try to examine Mali from a sort of first-hand account, because, again, most of the stuff that we have about Mali from this period of time comes from the outside. It's people that are not of the Mali Empire writing about Mali, and we all know that brings in bias and perspective issues. So the Sundiata epic coming out of Mali is a really interesting story about his life, how he kind of came from nothing but was able to put together this really big army and then deliver his people from the evil Sasso kings, how he went on to become the first Mansa of himself and establish, I'll see if you see here, I've named him Sundiata Keita. He establishes the Khitan dynasty. This is the dynasty that is going to rule Mali for the entirety of its imperial existence. So this guy's pretty important, Sundiata is. He is also going to establish a new capital city. So Djenné is considered as a potential capital city. Timbuktu was growing, but it wasn't necessarily capital city at that time. Instead, Sundiata is going to choose a city. Let me do some housekeeping here. Where am I typing? No. Oh, come on, OBS. Don't be a jerk. There we go. You heard that the Lion King is loosely based on Sundiata. Huh. There might be some truth to that. If we look at Scar, the bad guy lion, as the dominating Sasso, who come in and overthrow the rightful ruling Malinke of this area, there's potentially some overlap there. That's an interesting concept. I'll Huh. Maybe so. I don't know. I do think that there's a lot of influence as well from a Japanese movie called Kimbo the White Lion that pretty clearly got ripped. But Niani. Niani is the new capital city. And I do have a photo of some of the ruins. And I'll kind of warn you that this is not necessarily the most sort of sexy looking ruins, but again, there are some issues with maintaining a lot of this stuff. So, whoop, that's Mansa Musa. Here we go. This is Niani. And these buildings here are from the same sort of building style where you have pounded earth and adobe bricks with reinforced wood limbs for structural additions. You do here see some stone wall work, which again is going to be pretty interesting and fairly rare. But when I started looking for pictures of excavations in Niani, I didn't really find a lot, especially ones that I could share. I ran into some things that are, in publications that say very directly you can't share these photos. So I try my best not to get into hot water by sharing stuff that I don't feel like I could share or should share. So there's that. So Sundiata is not going to even stop there. So he brings the people out, he establishes the kingdom, he sets himself up a new capital. But this guy's also going to expand his territory in just about every direction, north, south, east, and west. He's going to move in and take over what is the remains of the old empire of Ghana. And when he gets Ghana, he's going to get access to a lot of those trade routes, which means, of course, he's going to be able to tap into all of that money. And Sundiata, by all accounts of history, both external and internal, is a very wise ruler. And he's going to set up something that is effectively a federation system, where when he conquers somebody, that person or that people group is effectively able to choose a representative from their people that is basically their ruler, but that person also sits on this big council called the Gabara Assembly. And this is a pretty interesting group. The Gabara's job is to act in an advisory capacity to the Mansa. By the way, Mansa is just their word for king. That's, so many words. I can type all these out, though. So Mansa, so right now he's Mansa Sundiata. But the Gabara is his advisory council. They are responsible for helping him make all sorts of decisions. They are also responsible for the people that live within their boundaries. So if the Mansa makes a rule, he does not necessarily directly enforce that. He gives that task over to one of the members of the Gabara, which allows these people to have a direct sense of power sharing. But what's really interesting is that Sundiata also gives the Gabara the job of picking the next heir. Now, they do have to pick from the family, they do have to pick from the Kayada line, but they get to pick the next ruler. So, that's a pretty big deal. And this system is actually really versatile. It allows Sundiata to expand his empire very, very rapidly without necessarily causing a lot of internal distress, because these people, to a certain extent, are still allowed self-rule. Really cool stuff. Really interesting stuff. He's also going to establish a sort of a constitution. It's called the Korukan Fuga. And this is not necessarily a written constitution, but it is a stated and known law code that is very clear. It's transmissible between groups of people. And this is a pretty big deal because this is a lot of advances happening really, really rapidly. And people are bringing a whole bunch of stuff to the table. And Sundiata is listening and incorporating these new ideas into the Constitution. He's using the Gabara effectively, and he's especially allowing the Gabara to act a lot as generals. So in this expansion movement, of course, you need good military leaders. And it turns out that he actually has a lot of good people that he allows to sort of take over as quasi-independent military leaders. Not necessarily fully independent. They have a larger sort of goal, but they're able to work a lot within parameters to get things done the right way. Sundiata is an amazingly effective leader, and I can't say enough good things about this guy. Hey, Finesse, good to see you. I'm doing okay. Mentally, I'm really well. I'm a little bit physically tired, and I've had a little bit of a stomach ailment, but that has not dampened my spirit. I feel pretty good, and I really enjoy talking about this Western African stuff. So I'm pretty stoked about all of that. And Tuna, hey, you're here in time, indeed. Almost, not too late, not too late. You've only missed about 30 minutes of the actual talk. I ran my mouth a lot at the beginning, and then we had an OBS crash. So you haven't necessarily missed a whole bunch. You should take a nap after the stream. If I take a nap after the stream, I may as well go on to bed. Because it'll be about 9 o'clock or 2100 here. I need to drink some more of my tea. This was supposed to help my tummy calm down. All right. So Sundiata, really effective guy, really good leader, does a lot of stuff that is going to put Mali on the fast track to growth. They have expanded quite a bit, and things are going pretty well. And the Mali Empire is going to continue to grow. So Sundiata rules from 1235 to 1255. So he's on the throne for about 20 years. That is plenty enough time for him to create these systems and get everything working and leave a very stable empire behind, which does continue on after he's gone. And the next few Mansas are all going to be effective as well. They continue to expand. Most of the direction that they are expanding, though, is to the south and the west. So basically adding territory down here, even along the coastline of Africa. And the Empire of Mali is going to be growing quite a bit. Now, this region right here and down into here are going to start being particularly important. So like right around in here is going to be kind of the really good heartland. Now there's good stuff over here as well, and there is some expansion further back to the east, following these trade routes and expanding further up these trade routes, if you will. And things are going to be going pretty well. That all comes to a bit of an end when we get to Mansa Khalifa. Mansa Khalifa takes over about 1274, and he only rules for a year, from about 1274 to about 1275. And he is not Wiz Khalifa. No, this guy can't be considered a whiz at anything. If anything, he's just taking a whiz. He is a bad ruler. The sources all say that he's bad, and under his rule, some of the territory out here to the east is going to manage to break away, including this big region called Gao, G-A-O, that had been conquered and brought into the larger fold of the Federation. So Gao is going to break away and become independent. This is a big loss of income, because this big city itself has a lot of trade running through it. And he's just a bad ruler. And he's so bad that he ends up getting assassinated. But when he gets assassinated, this is going to do a little bit of trouble because the Gabara, the Gabara is the assembly. The Gabara is not going to be unified behind one ruler. A lot of them had sort of put Khalifa in place to be their representative, and when he gets assassinated, that makes all of his supporters in the Gabara a little bit upset, and we end up with this situation where half of the Gabara assembly is sort of fighting the other half. And now this is not necessarily open warfare, but it's very much a power struggle. And when a ruler gets assassinated, of course, this throws all sort of hurt feelings and upsetness into the mix, and things get pretty nasty. And for about the next decade or so, you're going to have a string of fairly ineffective Mansas. You're going to have some very short-termed Mansas where, you know, they might rule for a week, or they might rule for 6 or 7 months. but that is going to change when we get to Mansa Sakura. And you're like, wait a second, that's a Japanese word. Bad, so more Michael Jackson than Wiz Khalifa then. Oh, ba-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Hey, Drop Bear, good to see you. Welcome. How are you? I listened to a lot of Weird Al today while I was setting up stuff at work, and I listened to his parody of Bad, which of course is Fat, which would probably never fly now with the PC culture that we live in, but I think it's hilarious. And now I will get canceled because I said that on stream. But, alas. I think Weird Al's funny. Just laugh. Okay. Mansa Sakura, who rules from 1285 to 1300, is going to do a lot when it comes to fixing Mali. He is going to put the Gabara back together. He's going to calm down all of the troubles between the factions. He's also going to reconquer Gao, that big, really rich region out here in the east. So this sort of brings them and their money back into the fold. Everybody appreciates this. I just got here. Could you start over from the beginning? Moose, I could, but I won't. However, when I get done, you can hit the play button and watch from the beginning. So it's still there. How you doing, Moose? Hope you're having a good one, man. So, Mansa Sakura is going to be a good leader. He puts everything back together. There are a few historians that sort of credit him with the future survival of the Mali Empire. Had he not been so capable and effective in putting everything back together, some people do suspect that the Mali Empire itself would have fallen into a full-out civil war and ended up breaking up, turning back into some sort of loosely affiliated system of states that all fought each other. But Sakura was able to put everything back together. And that is a good thing, because we want Mali to hang around, because the next guy is one of the big guys. And he is Mansa Musa. One of the guys that you might have. Are there cherry blossoms involved? No, I don't think so, Vern. I would love to go to Sakura during the Cherry Blossom Festival, though. That would be really cool. I've never actually even been to DC during the Cherry Blossom Festival, which I would like to do. I got close one time, but I missed it by, I think, like a week or two. That would be really neat. It'd be really neat to see. You know, it's spelled Molly, but you're hearing Molly and you're thinking Percocet. I hear you. I hear you. Not that I'm familiar with the use of the drug as a party drug or anything like that. I don't think I've ever taken a Percocet before. But I know what you're talking about, Drop Bear. It has not escaped me. All right, so here's Mansa Musa. There we go. Big dude. Really important guy. This particular image of him holding the giant golden nugget here is actually from a map that's made a little bit later on in the 1350s that comes out of Europe. This dude is super fabulously wealthy. He is thought by some historians, to have been one of the richest people that has ever lived on Earth. Mansa Musa is in Civ 6, right? From the song. Oh, yeah. Of course, from the song. Yeah. Sips tea. I'm with you. Yeah, so Mansa Musa is a pretty important guy. We have a lot of writing about him that comes from both European sources and Islamic sources. Again, I mentioned at the top of the stream how rich this guy was. He really is one of the richest rulers that we know about in history. And he is actually the great nephew of Sundiata. So he's really close to the sort of the core family of the Khatan dynasty. this guy is really big and really, really for sure important stuff. And one of the reasons we know so much about him is because of how much he traveled. And this is going to bring us back to the, was he really that great of a nephew? I would say so. I think Sundiata would probably be pretty proud of this guy. He was an effective ruler. By all accounts, he was a wise and just ruler. He was capable at preserving his borders, but also defending his people. He did bring a lot of wealth into his kingdom, and he left behind a whole bunch of stuff. Great ruler, sure, but nephew. I mean, I don't know if he was a little punk kid that kicked his great uncle in the shins or stuff like that. I do not actually know. I don't know of his childhood, or if even, I don't even know if he knew Sundiata. I would suspect so. Their lives might have overlapped a little bit, but I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it, Sundiata died in 1255, and if Mansa Musa took over in 1312, for them to have overlapped in life, he would have had to have been born in 1255, which would have made him like 52. Well, no, I doubt that they knew each other. I doubt that they even knew each other. I had to do some math there, which is definitely not my forte, and so I apologize that I had to kind of count out loud. It's not really my thing. So anyway, one of the reasons we know so much about Mansa Musa is because of his travel. And the particular travel that he did was the Hajj. And if you are familiar with Islam, one of the pillars of Islam is this thing called the Hajj, where if you are capable financially and physically, at least once in your life, you are supposed to go to basically the Muslim Holy Land over here in Saudi Arabia, to the city of Mecca, to the city of Medina. You're literally supposed to walk the pathway that the Prophet Muhammad walked, and you're supposed to see the places that he prayed and pray at the places that he prayed. This is, if you've ever seen a picture of the city of Mecca where all of these people are sort of walking around this big black box, that's the Kaaba, which holds inside of it a meteor in historical sense. But according to Islamic tradition, it encloses part of a dwelling place of Abraham. So maths ain't your thing either. You're pretty much minored it, but you pretty much minored in it. Well, I got all the way up to calculus before I realized that I needed to stop. And I probably would not have stopped had I had a better teacher. But the teacher of math and I did not get along at all. I was told there would be no math. Sorry, Moose. I just had to do it myself. Yeah, so Mansa Musa went on the Hajj. And to do that, he traveled down a lot of these trade routes and basically made his way all the way over Africa, over here into Egypt, and then all the way over through the Levant region and down here into Arabia. So that's a pretty long trip for a guy in the ancient world to take. But what's notable about this is just the sheer amount of stuff that he brought with him. He's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in his entourage. He is carrying around with him gifts for all of the notable emperors and kings and caliphs and people that he might meet. And again, I mentioned this up at the top in a random history fact that I guess I'll just kind of bring it back in now. This guy brought with him 8 tons, potentially. This is an estimation. 8 tons of gold. Think you have to walk around it 7 times, yeah, and you're supposed to touch it, but if you can't, you're meant to at least point to it, or so you understand. Yeah. So there's a lot of actual sort of ritual procedure to the Hajj. And you sort of, and this might sound kind of goofy, but it's actually pretty important. You get this kind of like order form of, it's kind of like the how to do a Hajj proper checklist, where it tells you like you're supposed to do this, and then you're supposed to do this, and you're supposed to do this. But this is something that Muslim people do by the tens of thousands every year. One of the things that's actually been causing a lot of trouble in the last couple of years with COVID is that the country of Saudi Arabia has limited the number of people and the type of people that can actually go on the Hajj. Because with travel being locked down and people coming from all over the world, they didn't want to turn Mecca and Medina into what is essentially a giant COVID factory. They did allow more people this year than they did last year. I think they may have actually said nobody can do the Hajj last year in 2020, but I'm not 100% certain on that. So you're welcome to check me and fix me if I said that wrong. If they did allow anybody last year, it was a very, very limited amount of people, and it might have only been people in country. I can't remember exactly how they handled that though. But yeah, the Hajj is something that is a big deal for Mansa Musa because he was a very devout Muslim, and as he's going to all these different places, he's meeting all of these big people, and he is giving these fabulously wealthy gifts. But what he's also doing is he's sort of adding on to his entourage, because when he gets back home from the Hajj, he has with him all of these amazing people that he has met from across the ancient world. He's bringing with him scholars, he's bringing architects, he's bringing artists, he's bringing religious leaders. This guy brings back the best that he can buy, and with as much money as he has, that's a lot. A lot. And he sets to building stuff inside of Mali that is just this gigantic explosion of really big and really cool things. For example, if we go to images, this guy is the Sankore Madrasa, and this is in Timbuktu, and this is one of the oldest universities or institutions of learning in Africa. It's technically now Timbuktu University, but this is part of the original building that was there, and you can see that we have our little speaker, because as a madrasa, it started off as a school to teach Islam and the tenets of Islam to people. You teach them how to read, you teach them how to recite the Quran, so on and so forth. But that turned into a larger institution of learning. And this was a pretty big deal because nobody else in that part of Africa had anything like that. And Mansa Musa is bringing all of this stuff in. He also goes on to build what is referred to as the Great Mosque, which is this guy. This is the Great Mosque. You can see here the same sort of building style. Again, we've got our big kind of mud brick walls. We've got our reinforced studs, our little call to prayer speaker up here. If you're not familiar with Islam, there are certain numbers of times every day that you're supposed to pray. And if you are in a Muslim area, they actually play out something called the call to prayer. And it's usually a short little recitation by the local imam. Sometimes it's recorded, but other times it's actually somebody getting on a microphone and sort of calling people to prayer. And if you are a very, very devout Muslim, you go to the mosque and you do your prayers. But most times people just know what time this is, and wherever they are, they put their rug down and they orient themselves towards Mecca and they do their prayers. But yeah, that call to prayer thing can get you. If you've never been to a Muslim country and you're not familiar with it, the one that hits in the middle of the night can scare the pants off of you, or the one that hits really, really early in the morning can scare the pants off of you. If you're in a really deep sleep and you start, waking up to, oh, it'll roll you out of bed really fast. Like Morgan Freeman did in Robin Hood. Kind of, sort of, yeah. There you go. So that's your prayer. That's one of the other pillars of Islam, is your prayer. a very historical movie. It's got elements of history. I won't argue with that. Super accurate. All right, so under Mansa Musa, Mali is going to hit its height. It's sort of apex, if you will. And you knew you weren't going to get out of here without looking at another map. So here we go. So this is Mali Empire under Mansa Musa. We see here our big trade routes that are going up to Tunisia and to Morocco. We see Gao being reconquered. We have Timbuktu. We have our capital here at Niani. We have Jenne, part of our country. All of these things that you're looking at here are gold fields. These are literally places where they mined gold. And these are very, very lucrative. If you'll remember me saying that this sort of region right down here is going to become sort of the heartland of Mali, it's because of these gold fields. Holding on to those particular gold fields was a strategic importance because it was making them a ton of money, literally tons of money. Again, here's the Niger River that I referenced at the very beginning, kind of curling its way through here. That's going to be a very important water source, but it's also going to, of course, be used for travel as well. Like Costner's accent, yeah. Right, accent, right. You like maps. You're a visual person, and it also helps to put things into perspective. Yes. Wait, you're telling me that Robin Hood wasn't real? Next thing you'll be spouting fake news with all these things like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny don't exist. Well, Drop Bear, I'm going to have to ruin your day. Because Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, they're actually just the same guy that only gets paid twice a year for sitting in the food court. I'm sorry. And on a brighter note, plague. Feels amazing. Yeah, so Mansa Musa dies in 1337. We're not exactly sure how he died. There are some stories that say that he drowned in the river. There are other stories that say he died coming back from another Hajj. We're not 100% sure how he died, but he did die in 1337. And then comes the plague. And the plague. Yeah, so here's the thing about the plague. Everybody knows about the Black Death and how bad it was in Europe and how it's killing all these people in Europe. And, well, guess what? It's killing lots of people in West Africa, too. Plague moves along trade routes. The people in the Mali Empire, guess what? They do trades. Also, hey Batbird, and hey Kelly. Yeah, yes, 1337, he dies with Leet. He went on multiple Hajjes. Yes, he did go on multiple Hajjes. And he totally was flexing because he brought all of this stuff with him every time that he went. As one does. As one does, right? So the Black Death gets into Mali through the trade. Is Leet a plague? No. Leet is from the late 90s, early 2000s internet world. Leet speak was how people tried to talk or type on the internet. Joar, Leet, Haxor, stuff like that. So 1337 is Leet speak for Leet, and it's short for elite. It's from the old days of the internet, and if you weren't there, you weren't necessarily missing a whole lot. Just to be honest with you. But Leet speak is like using letters for numbers and using numbers for letters. Like you don't write the letter L, you use the number 1. You don't write the letter E, you use the number 3. And the number 7 is the letter T. So, yeah. Age, sex, location. Talus knows what I'm talking about. The plague, like COVID, only about 1 million times worse. And no hand sanitizer or face mask back then. Yeah, pretty much. It's not a truck, it's a series of tubes. Yeah, so Black Plague shows up in Mali, and it's really hard to know exactly how many people it killed. The lower ends of estimation suggest that it killed somewhere around a third of the population. The higher end estimation suggests that it killed half of the population. So this is really, really bad stuff. I am Batbird. Yep, there you go. Oh, good times. Good times. Lead speak. Lead speak. Ring round the rosy. Yep, that's it. Pocket full of posies. So, somewhere between a third and a half of the population of the empire in Mali is going to die to the plague. And as you might expect, this is going to throw a lot of stuff into chaos. The Mansas are going to have a really hard time holding on to control. There's going to be a few times where there are some usurpation, where people that weren't selected by the Gabara are going to try to take over the empire. There are even going to be some assassinations led by the Gabara. And for a certain period of time, in the late 1300s and early 1400s, especially by the late 1400s, I'm sorry, the mid 1400s, there's going to be a couple of instances where it looks like the Gabara even tried to rule by itself. Like some of the ministers say, we're not going to pick from the royal family anymore, we're going to pick ourselves. But the problem with so much happening and so much death going on is that the historical sources dry up a lot too. We don't have very much history from this period of time. A lot of the stuff that we think happened is really just based on some kind of quasi-educated guessing. There's not necessarily a lot of direct, really reliable evidence. It's kind of a mess. Back from a class, probably missed everything, but you're back in time for assassinations, and that's all that matters. Figment, you're also back in time for the plague, because that good old plague that wrecks Europe also wrecks Mali. Yep. Wrecks Mali. Wish they had your own Plinies. Yeah, you gotta have your own historians. Wouldn't that be amazing? But this is going to start the eventual decline of Mali. And if we're really being honest and we're looking at the Mali Empire as an arc, the plague is going to be the beginning of the end. But that is going to be vastly accelerated by the Portuguese. The Portuguese are going to show up first under a guy named Diogo Gomez. And about 1453, 1454, this Portuguese guy named Diogo Gomez is going to start leading some European, Portuguese, clearly they're European, Portuguese explorations of this region. Now, there's some islands off of the coast of Africa right here. These little islands that the Portuguese had they had effectively taken over. But Diogo Gomez is going to start moving along the coastline here, especially moving up these rivers and trying to get into the heartland of Africa, because at this point, people in Europe know that Mali is there. It's almost impossible to avoid knowing that Mali is there after how flashy Mansa Musa had been. And I've got a picture here of a statue of Diogo Gomez. Here we go. So this is Diogo Gomez. Now, this particular statue is not in Africa or Portugal. This is in Cape Verde, one of the islands that I just pointed to off the western coast of Africa. But this guy is going to be one of the responsible guys for putting the Portuguese in contact with Mali. So the first attempts to contact the people of Mali are going to basically be kind of like raiding parties. The Portuguese are going to show up armed and sort of just invade but that's actually going to be rebuffed quite a bit. Oh, is colonizing happening now? Yeah, we're getting to the 1450s, and it's colonizing time. So Diogo Gomez is actually in cahoots with Henry the Navigator, the guy that is basically running the Portuguese school for exploration and cartography. So, yeah, we're getting to that period of time. There are going to be a lot of people that move from various parts of Europe over into Portugal because of this big school that's being run by Henry the Navigator, including some people from Venice. There's a Venetian guy named Alvisa Cadmosto, and he was a Venetian slave trader. He was just a slave trader, and he did some stuff down in Africa trying to get a slave trade started. And we could go into the history of slavery in this particular period of time, but the easiest thing that I can say is, while a lot of Western Europeans, like the British and the French and the Germans and the Italians, had more or less abandoned slavery, the Iberians, the Spanish and the Portuguese had not. And that comes a lot from the leftover influence of Muslim control on the Iberian Peninsula. For a really long time, what is today Spain and Portugal were controlled by Muslim armies and Muslim empires. And Islam doesn't have a problem with slavery at this time. So if you were not a Muslim, you could get captured and sold as a slave. And there were already really big slave markets that were being perpetuated across the Mediterranean world, where Europeans would buy slaves from Muslims. It was one of the things that happened. So here comes, Cadamosto. He's from Venice, but he's sailing under the flag of Portugal, trying to get slaves from this area. And this is way before the New World is even known about. So this is like 45 or 46 years before anybody like Columbus goes over to America. So there we go. But by the time we get to 1481, things are really going downhill pretty bad for our people in Mali. And nope. Are you going to let me type here? Can I type here? Aha. By the time we get to the Mansa named Mahmud II, things are going to be really bad. Mahmud rules from 1481 to 1496. And he is basically going to witness the collapse of the empire. Hey everybody, let's invade Spain. The region of the east over by Gao is going to fall away under Mahmud II. There's going to be a region along the northwestern coastline of Mali that's going to fall away. It's a region called Takur. I can actually show you this stuff. Let me pull up the map. Beep, 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 beep. Well, we can wait for that a little bit because that's from a little bit later. The only thing that's really going to keep Mahmud going is expanding trade with Portugal. But this is sort of like dealing with the devil, right? Everybody in Mali knows that Portugal is not necessarily interested in anything except for their own value. But with all of the loss of territory that Mahmud is facing, you kind of have to go with whatever you can get. But when he starts trading with the Portuguese, that is going to just attract more Portuguese to the area. And so the Portuguese look at Mali as a problem. Let's just be completely honest here. If you are Portugal, you are trying to build what is effectively your own empire. And you get down to Western Africa and you find this really well put together centralized state, a federation of peoples living under the rule of one central authority. They have fabulous amounts of wealth. They live in a really wide area. They have a very big army. If you're the Portuguese, your thought is, we don't want to fight these people. And what the Portuguese end up doing is sort of, I mean, it's both good business and it's also incredibly nefarious. They weasel into the Mali Confederation and they start convincing people to break away. And they'll say, look, if you break away, we'll back you up. And the Portuguese have stuff that people in Africa didn't have. And that's cannons. Turns out that cannons versus no cannons is a pretty big win condition. Let's just be honest. So when Mahmud expands trade with Portugal, the Portuguese take this as a symbol of weakness, that he has to rely on them, and they sort of double down. And this is going to really expedite the end of Mali, because he's going to lose more trade along the coastline as some of these smaller areas break away with Portuguese help, but he's also going to give rise to a new empire that is going to show up over to the east called Songhai. And Songhai is basically going to be the end of Mali, but not quite yet. I did find that one of the things that a lot of people kind of look over during this time period is exactly how, I guess mercantile is the right way to say it, the Portuguese are in this. When you hear about Portugal starting trade with Africa, especially from a Western perspective, what you hear about is them bringing all of this cool stuff from Europe down to Africa, and how Africa was just like, oh, look at all this cool stuff. But if we look at this in the perspective of what we've talked about tonight, the Empire of Mali was bigger than Portugal. It had a higher population than Portugal. It had bigger bankroll than Portugal. It had a bigger military than Portugal. This was not the Europeans bringing civilization down to Africa. This was the Europeans showing up and realizing that they were outmatched and outclassed and having to play dirty to break Mali up. That's really what's happening here. And you rarely ever hear that particular point of view, mostly because, number one, a lot of people don't have the time to talk about Mali in their class. Number two, when they do, it's always taught, or, well, I should say that in my history, when I've had history classes that I've taken in the past, it has tended to be very pro-Western in its slant, where, oh yeah, the highly civilized Europeans were going down to the darkest Africa where things were backwards and people don't know how to read or write. That's absolutely inaccurate. It just really, really is. And one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk about this particular period of time is because we get to talk about stuff just like that. All right. So that's Mahmud II. And if things were not bad enough, when we get to Mahmud III, it's just real, real bad. Hey, Joey. Good to see you. I hope you're having a good one. So by the time we get to Mahmud III, this guy is going to be basically the last emperor. There are people after him, but he's kind of the last guy. He rules from 1496 to 1559, so he rules a really, really long time, but he loses a lot. And over the course of his reign, there are going to be a lot of people that start breaking away, and this Songhai group is going to be the biggest of the bads. So if we look at our map here, wrong map. By the time we get to 1530, all of this territory right here used to be part of Mali. But now we have Sime and Wolof. These are the regions of the north along the coastline that I were talking about that were breaking away with the support of European trade. But here we have Songhai. And look, they have taken Gao, they have taken Timbuktu, they have taken Janae. really all that Mali had left at that point was Niani and the gold mines over here. Mossi is a new empire that is growing as well. That's going to start pushing along this border here. This border here. Whoop, 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 whoop. Whoop. What's going on? What was that? There we go. Anyway, so Mossi is going to start expanding this way as well. Mali is getting swallowed. Basically, that's what I'm getting at. You sense that this guy stinks. The last usually isn't the best. So it's not that he necessarily stinks. I mean, he manages to stay on the throne for like 60-something years. Which means that he's got to have something going for him, right? What his problem is that he's just overrun by problems. It's the death of 1,000 cuts, and he has to sort of sit there and endure all of them. So Takur is going to turn into its own kingdom. Songhai is going to get bigger. There's a new empire that shows up that breaks away and forms. The Mossi are there. There's another group called the Kaabu that show up that are messy. And Mahmud III is going to have to send to Portugal for aid. He's going to have to actually send them a message saying, look, if you want to continue to trade with me, you're going to have to help me out because I can't protect my borders anymore. And guess what the Portuguese decide to do? And if you guessed, they decide to just leave him to rot on the vine. You guessed correct. They go, we really don't have the time or the money. No, so he basically he lit the beacons. You know, Mali calls for aid. And basically Mahmud III is going to be sitting there and he's like, where was Portugal when Timbuktu fell? And the answer is Portugal was sitting there counting their giant stacks of money because they would prefer to deal with a lot of small people that don't have leverage instead of one big empire that has a lot of leverage. So there we go. Songhai is going to recognize that Mahmud is in basically the direst of straits. And they're going to launch a really big invasion force, and they're actually going to take Niani for a little while. Mahmud has to flee up into the northern part, basically up and towards the coastline, to try to get away from them. He does launch a counteroffensive, and he does manage to take back the capital, but he realizes that Niani basically is indefensible, that it sits on top of these big gold fields, and Songhai has basically established the fact that they're not going to give these areas up for long, so he has to move the capital, and he moves the capital to a new city called Kangaba. This is closer to the more westerly gold fields, but this is pretty much it. Inevitable betrayal for the win, right? For about the next 30 years, we really don't know very much about what's going on in Mali. The internal historians are non-existent. Another fact about Mahmud III that you found that you were not going to share. One of the things that kind of doomed Mahmud's defense strategy was that when he launched this counterattack to take back Niani, that the big battle that he fought with the Songhai to take the capital city back cost him an enormous amount of his troops. And with that really big loss of his army, that played into this larger idea of I can't hold the city anymore. I basically, he just did not have the soldiers that he needed to be able to hold the city. And this big loss of troops was fundamental in his decision to move the seat of the empire to Kangaba, which was a smaller city in more defensible territorial location. Hey, Atendarius, how are you? Good to see you. Have I already done the Billy Joel song? No, we have not. We are still raising funds for that, but we're really close. I think we're like 95, 96%. Oh, no, we're 99%. We're almost there. So, almost there. And we won't do it immediately. I'll have to actually schedule that. So, once we hit the goal, I'll have to work up the material for it, and then we'll schedule that a little bit later. And there we go. And there we go. So Tendarios is just like, fine, I'll get you there. So we didn't start the fire, but Tendarios did. Thank you all for contributing to the We Didn't Start the Fire community challenge. So for those of you that were not around when we incepted this idea, the concept is we're going to take the Billy Joel song, We Didn't Start the Fire, and we're going to break down all the lyrics, and we're going to go through the lyrics one by one, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a blurb of history about what all of that stuff means. And then we're going to listen to the song to the point that we all have it all memorized, and we all now have a new party gig. We're actually not going to do that last part. You don't ever have to listen to the song. And technically, I can't even play the song on stream during that particular stream because it's against terms of service, and I'll get the recording muted. So I can't even play the song, which I guess kind of stinks, but it is what it is. All right, so we will schedule that pretty soon. You can sing it badly, and we can sing along at home. Marilyn Monroe. Bum ba-dum bum, bum ba-dum bum bum. Doggy McBark, thank you for the follow, and welcome to the adventure. I can do it in karaoke. Hey, you magnificent. Good to see you. I might see if I could learn how to play that on the guitar. I've never played the guitar on stream before. That might be an interesting bonus if I can learn it and play it on stream. I will look into that. I will not make any promises, but I will look into that. I don't want to get myself in over my head. All right. So again, we don't really know that much about what's going on in Mali after Mahmoud III dies. We can guess some things, but we do know that things are going pretty badly. Now, one of the things that starts happening around this time is that a lot more European interest in Africa is growing, especially by the time we get to the middle 1500s. There is a lot of European interest in Africa, and we get this guy. This is one of the cooler maps that exists, one of the oldest maps that shows all of Africa. And this is a map made in 1554 by a German cartographer. What's going on here? Why is this not centered? Okay, I think I need to stop messing with this because the computer is not caring for this at all. All right. Let me just kind of move this right here and hope that you all can see what I'm pointing at. Again, this is one of the older maps of Africa that exists. It's from 1554, but you can see basically the entire coastline of Africa. And we see things here being broken up into regions, but notice this particular region right here, Mali. Bum-ba-da-bum. So there is our empire of Mali on an old German map from 1554. Also, my audio quality changes when I switch scenes. I think that has something to do with the volume levels that I have it set at. I think it might be that the audio levels are set differently. I can try to fix that. Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Worry about negative 25. Negative 25. I don't know why it would be. It looks like I have. It looks like I have them set at the same location. I don't know what's going on there. Some weird OBS stuff. Why is the letter AE on that map? You thought us Norwegians were the only ones using it. So that's Old English stuff. Well, actually, I guess it's Old German stuff, because Old English is basically just German. It could also be the device being picked up as audio input. They're both set to pick up my microphone here, my audio microphone, I believe. Yeah. Yep. Let me see. Microphone. Microphone check. Yep. Microphone. Yep. I don't know, man. OBS is weird, and if there were anything that were consistently more consistent, I would go with it. But nothing is consistent. Everything has big problems. You actually pronounced it correctly before I tried to pronounce it. I would pronounce that E. But I don't know how you pronounce it. Like ether. You singing microphone is proof that you can sing We Didn't Start the Fire. So I didn't say that I couldn't sing. I have never said that I couldn't sing. I used to be in bands. I have in the past sang for bands. I don't have the world's worst singing voice. What I don't want to do is promise that I'm going to be able to learn this song and sing it on stream when I am not going to have time to practice it and learn it, how to play it and sing it at the same time. Learning how to play a song on the guitar and learning how to sing a song is a different set of skills. And learning how to do both of them together is yet another set of skills. And I don't want you all to wait for 2 months while I learn how to sing this just so that we can sing it on stream. It's funnier if it's bad. Yes, if I played it, it would be okay. But if I played the song off of YouTube or something like that, no, it would not be okay. Yeah, I have never claimed to not be singy or musically inclined. I am not the best singer in the world, but I am fair to middling. So it's a lot better. It's a lot better the louder I can get. Like if I can get on the microphone and sing kind of loud and yelly, it sounds better. Just do it with karaoke. We'll think about it, and that's all that I'll say now, because otherwise we're just going to keep going around in circles, and I'm going to keep saying the same thing over and over again. All right. So let us finally wipe out Mali. And the way that we're going to wipe out Mali is with a group of people from Morocco called the Saad. And it's not sad, it's Saad. And if we go over here to our images, this is a list of our Muslim states. We can see here, this is about 1600. The blue here is the Ottoman Empire, but the green here in Morocco is the Saadians. And we can see that they have conquered down into our Western African region. They have taken the city of Gao, they have taken Timbuktu, and guess what? They also wipe out the rest of Mali. Around 1610, the Saudis And by the way, they wipe out Songhai as well. There's a really big battle between the Moroccans and Songhai. They took Islam. So the Moroccans, the Saadi dynasty, were Muslim, and they were taking over the trade routes that were going into Western Africa, who were also people that were Muslim. So all of these people are Muslims at that point. Shane pronouncing that letter correctly. Thank you, Joey. I appreciate that. You cannot sing, no one wants to hear it. So one of the reasons why the Saad dynasty was so successful is because they had these things. These things are arquebuses, or arquebi. And as you can tell, they are guns. Now, they're fairly primitive guns. These are what would have been matchlock guns, where you sort of put a little bit of powder right here, and this big thing holds a fuse, and your trigger basically controls this fuse falling down into this pan, and you have this really long fuse that sort of hangs down the back side of the gun. But let me tell you, if you get enough of these things and you point them at the bad guys, it doesn't really matter if you're just touching a fuse off. It kills them, because nobody in Western Africa had these things. And the Saad had not only arquebus, but they had cannons that they had traded with the British for. And when they got down into Western Africa around 1610, they are going to wipe out the last named ruler of Mali, who actually ends up being Mahmud IV, who is pushed off the throne about 1610. Now, there are people that go on claiming to be the Khitan dynasty, the basically the heirs of Sundiata, but they are no longer an empire. If they controlled territory, they had very limited territory around a couple of cities at the max. By that point, all of the little countries in Africa had been effectively broken up by the Europeans, and there was not really going to be room for any big empires in that area anymore. Those look Chinese inspired. Probably more accurate than it seems. The original Chinese gun was basically just a cannon on a stick, and you kind of held the stick under your armpit, and you ran around with a fuse, and you literally stuck the fuse into the cannon and shot the cannon out of your armpit. These arquebus are not really that far from that. You would literally have a big spool of fuse that sort of hung down either over your shoulder or down into a big pouch at your waist that you would keep having to feed through the little mechanism on the gun itself. And if it was raining, your arquebus is useless, because it's going to get water down into the pan, and it's going to put out your fuse, and you're going to be out of luck. And a lot of people carried around a forked kind of monopod to help with the weight of these, because some of the barrels are really, really big and heavy. So you would kind of put your little stick down here and put your arquebus in the stick to help you aim at the bad guy. No wonder they called them Sod. They brought the sorrow. Shoot the cannon out of your armpit. The original Gundam is finally discussed. Oh yeah, that's where we get the giant robot weapons and such. Is from the old arquebus. But unfortunately for the once great empire of Mali, by 1610 or so, there really isn't an empire left. Again, there might be a few people over here that are from the line of Sundiata that are claiming to still be emperors. They are not emperors. They are at best city-state kings. And that is the history of the Empire of Mali. Now, as always, if you have questions about any of this stuff, I am happy to answer if I am able. Otherwise, if you have points that you would like to spend, you have below your chat window a whole bunch of adventure points that you have been accumulating. If you would like to spend those, now would be a good time. You are welcome to redeem those if you so desire. You have heard of offensive armpits, but this is ridiculous. I am not a Mali prince. Guess I am only a Nigerian one. Oh, Shiggy. Just don't send people emails because I have a feeling that they're just not going to trust you. Unfortunately, all of the other Nigerian princes are giving you a bad name, and nobody's going to believe that you actually have all that money anymore. All right. So, do we have any questions? How much of the Timbuktu University knowledge still exists there today? Quite a bit, Tuna. Quite a bit. Because it had never actually been completely wrecked. It had never been burned down or destroyed or anything like that. So there are a lot of fairly old texts and books and stuff that are still there. Now, of course, they're at this point relics, and you can't necessarily go access them. You can't just go to the library and go pick up a book from 1353 or something like that. But there is a lot of stuff over there that is very, very old, including a lot of very old documents from the internal workings of the Mali Empire, trade documents between emperors or Mansas of the Mali and kings from other areas, all sorts of stuff where it comes down to basically history of the deliberation of the Gabara assembly and things like that, but also just works that are in translation, so you have some really old Qurans down there, a fairly decent sized amount of Arabic, and then later wider Muslim histories. There's a lot of cool stuff there, and I would love to go to Timbuktu. I think that would be really awesome. I would love to go to a lot of these places, but one, right now travel is just kind of a no-no. But it's also fairly violent in some of these places, and the State Department really encourages a lot of people not to travel to some of these areas. And I don't always follow the instructions of the United States State Department, but sometimes I do. All right. Anybody else have any questions? Wait, that email wasn't from a Nigerian prince? Ah, alas. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. Nah, they won't. All right, let's see who's streaming in education right now. I'm not seeing a lot of people that are actually doing education in the education stream, which is kind of common. Usually when we look at the education streams, it's not necessarily educational. It's just people playing video games that are old. Yeah. So I'm trying to see if there's anybody that looks interesting that we might be able to raid. Let me look to see on this Discord that I joined to see if there's anybody. What's in the news? Just random. What is in the news? Well, there's a lot of stuff going on that's kind of a bummer. I think the biggest thing in the news right now is how badly America is leaving Afghanistan. That was going to be bad one way or the other, just to be honest, but the way that it's going right now is actually pretty horrible. It's not particularly organized at all, and it's not necessarily designed to help the Afghani people, but it's definitely designed to score political points. Let's see. There's some trouble brewing between Algeria and Morocco about some border regions. I haven't actually had a chance to read very much of the big news today, so there was a big earthquake in Haiti. The death toll for that has risen up past 1,200 people, which is, again, kind of a bummer. The big question right now that is kind of hitting a lot of people in the world is what to do with Afghani Afghani refugees that are getting out of the country before the Taliban really get to take over. You were watching Paleontologist earlier before your stream, though, because he's probably gone now. I don't know. Let's see if paleontologizing is around. Paleontologizing is not streaming at the moment. I joined a Discord called the Knowledge Fellowship, and we can see if anybody has posted a go live announcement there. Model building. Architecture. When was that? Oh, that's probably already gone. A forger guy, but that guy's probably... Yeah, this is all like a couple of hours old. Who is this? Some coding guy. Anybody interested in computer coding?
The Earth is billions of years
I
old.
know that the Earth is billions of years old. Anybody a computer coding fan? Imagine being a military member watching that mess. Yeah, sci-fi. I feel for the people that fought for that country and that went over and died in that country. It was never going to be a good scenario when we left. It did not have to be this bad. eComposer asks for a random history fact that most people get wrong. Something that most people get wrong. Wow, that's a good one. What do most people get wrong? Oh, here's a good one. In the Christmas Story, if you've ever seen the Christmas Story or heard about the Christmas Story about how there were 3 wise men, nowhere in the Christian scripture does it actually say that there were 3 of them. It just says that they brought 3 gifts. And it wasn't really until a couple hundred years after that the concept that there were 3 wise men was kind of invented and then given name. And that's where you get like Balthazar and Gaspar, and that's not their real names either. But yeah, it never says anywhere that there were 3 wise men. And here's a bonus one. They also did not show up at the nativity. So if you've ever seen a nativity scene that has 3 wise men at it, that is incorrect. They did not show up until much later. And now I'm ruining Christmas for everybody. What is the design to score? That is the design to score political points. Well, so it is my opinion, and I should probably put on the opinion hat for this, but I'll just state that it's my opinion because I don't have it on me. I'd have to reach up behind here and get it. It is my opinion that Biden and the Biden administration understands that most people don't care that much. And this is not the right way to approach the situation, but most people in America won't really care about how things are going in Afghanistan. They will only remember a year from now that he got us out of Afghanistan, and that will be the platform that they run on, not how they got us out of Afghanistan, but that he did get us out. And that will be politically bigger for him in the long run than the fallout that's happening right now. So yeah, political points. Joey wants his points back. I gave you like 4 things that are happening in the news. Aliens built the pyramids. You're curious to know about how you went about becoming a teacher. My mom was a teacher for 43 years. And some of the people that were the most impactful in my life were teachers. I had a teacher in grade school that was basically a really big mentor for me that helped me out a lot when I was growing up. When I got to high school, I had some really, really big influential teachers. The guy that taught me biology and physics was one of the greatest teachers that I've ever had in my life. And when I was really lost in college and didn't really understand what I wanted to do, teaching was always one of the options, and I thought about going after it. But what finally sold me on the idea was when I got into classes with one of my professors that is now one of my close friends. I've traveled with him a couple of times abroad. But when I started taking his classes, I knew that that was what I wanted to do. I really enjoy talking about stuff. I'm addicted to the little feeling that happens in people when they go from not knowing something to knowing something. I call it the light bulb moment. And you can kind of even see this happen for people where, they're puzzling and then they just kind of go like, and then they understand. That to me is an addictive drug that gets me high. And I really do believe that education is something that makes the world better. And I really do think that it is part of my calling. If I don't know how many people believe in destiny, but I think that I am particularly suited to breaking things down for people in a way that they can understand it. And for me, teaching is a way for me to make the world better. And I know it's very slow, and I know it doesn't always seem that way, but societal change doesn't always happen overnight. Sometimes you have to plant the seeds and then just sort of sit around and wait for it. But that's how I know, or that's how I knew. How can we get some good PR, guys? I don't know. Video people falling off of plane wheels. Ooh, yeah, that's not so good. Knowledge Fellowship. TFK, or TKF. Yes. I am a member of the TFK. There is a planned refugee site in Wisconsin from Fort McCoy. The state is already trying to predict the academic needs of all of these Afghanistan. Yeah, so there's going to be a problem with refugees. You're a software developer, but you're not a fan of coding. The Confederacy did not win the Civil War. No, they didn't. And they were fighting for slavery. There's another one. Unreliable narrator, but Trump claimed that he set the ball in motion to pull out of this sooner rather than later, and that nobody could stop it even though they wanted to. You don't know if this is the case or if he just thought it would make him look good at the time and is hoping nobody will remember it now. So Trump in 2019 did start negotiation with the Taliban for America to withdraw. What he doesn't actually share, which is one of his things, he frequently tells part of the truth, but not all of the truth. That's one of his gigs. When he started talking about this stuff with the with the Taliban, he purposefully did not include the Afghan government in these discussions. It was basically bilateral with the United States and the Taliban. And he was negotiating with the Taliban and not with the Afghan government and the Taliban. So he sort of did start the ball rolling on America pulling out, but he also hobbled the Afghan government in the entire process from the get-go. The timeline that he set up was not as rapid as the one that Biden is following, but he can take credit for stuff and people will believe it because anything that he says is stuff that people will believe. But he made a critical error in not including the Afghan government in his negotiations with withdrawal. And one of the biggest reasons right now that the Afghan government is so fragile is because he gave the Taliban everything that they wanted effectively. You would be surprised how many people think the Confederacy won. I live in Mississippi. I would not be surprised. Hey, Daria, good to see you. It's a Daria. Oh my goodness, I'm so far behind in chat. Daria, it is so good to see you. I hope that you are doing well. There have been a couple of times that I've thought about either calling or sending a text, and then I always find myself getting busy. And That is not me saying like, oh, look how good of a friend I am. That's actually me kind of going like, I should probably have just gone ahead and done that. So I apologize that I haven't, but I hope you're doing well. And I hope that everything is working out for you. I know that you've been through a rough patch, and you definitely had a lot of our thoughts and prayers, which I know is kind of a goofy thing to say, but you were on our mind. Why was the Afghan army so bad at fighting the Taliban? Well, the regions that the Taliban had a lot of control in were ones that they had control in for basically ever. And in those areas, the United States had never really had a lot of control in the first place, and the Afghan government had really never had a lot of control in the first place. So when America left, the Taliban basically had a launching point with a lot of the provinces, especially up in the northern part of Afghanistan, and especially like some of the stuff down in the really, really mountainous areas of the south, like Kandahar. And the Taliban basically, when the Americans left, the Afghan government did not have enough presence in some of those areas to even attempt to stop the Taliban by themselves, and America also left behind a lot of stuff. Just to be honest, we left behind what I read an article by a guy who was an officer in Afghanistan for quite a while, and he estimated that America left behind $1 trillion worth of war material, including 200,000 armored vehicles and potentially 60 Black Hawk helicopters. And that's not to include all of the body armor and the guns and the munitions and the grenades and the rocket-propelled grenades. It's just a big mess. No hurt feelings, you do the same. You've been prepping for Dragon Con. Woo! So many prints to print. 1,000 prints. Holy moly. Why didn't we just build a big wall? It's a big, beautiful wall. We'll keep out the Taliban. They're bad guys. They're bringing all the worst people in. We just build this big wall and we'll make Afghanistan pay for it. Right? Your taxes at work. Huge wall. Huge, beautiful wall. So we basically armed up the terrorists. Yeah, but to be fair, Moose, we did the same thing in the 80s. The American government and the CIA was effectively the fuel that ran Al-Qaeda. When Afghanistan was the target of invasion from Russia, there were a group of people called Mujahideen that were basically very strict religious Muslim freedom fighters that were standing up against the Russians, and they were getting creamed. But America started sneaking in guns and munitions to them, including people like Osama bin Laden. Yeah, Al-Qaeda. The CIA gave them guns and money to help them fight off the Russians. And then as soon as the Russians left, we were like, all right, now we're done and we're going to go away. And we kind of just left Afghanistan without following through with a lot of the things that we said that we were going to do. But there we go. Speaking of the wall, have you already seen that it's falling apart? Yeah, I saw some pictures from Arizona where basically the whole thing's washing out. Printer is a baby today. Per the demand of tradition. Yeah, pretty much. To also be fair, most of the things we leave behind needs annoying maintenance. It does. It does. Yeah, and I don't doubt that some of the stuff might have been attempted to be scuttled, but I mean, even leaving behind armor plating is a bonus, right? Any kind of thing that you leave behind to a group is potentially a big deal. You're going to be part of the art show. No one is talking about that. Nobody's talking about what, Batbird? What is that no one is talking about? And we learned nothing. Hey, Nix, good to see you. We don't really learn things, though. That's one of the problems with not knowing history. You just end up repeating the same mistakes, and it's unfortunate, but it's what happens, right? All right.
Walker's at the center.
Hush. I don't need you. Any final questions or statements? I don't mind hanging around and talking a little bit if there are actually things that people want to know about. We gave the terrorists their weapons. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something that we've done in several locations. We effectively propped up Saddam Hussein. The whole reason Saddam Hussein was, well, not the whole reason, but one of the biggest reasons Saddam Hussein was so angry at America is because we were trying to push him to attack Iran when Ayatollah Khamenei took over and kicked out the Shah. We were trying to put the Shah back in charge, and this is in the 70s and early 80s. But we kind of convinced Saddam Hussein that if he invaded Iran, he was going to get to keep all of his territory, and he got over there and Iran kicked his butt. And then we were like, okay, well, you're useless now, and kind of discarded the guy, and which made him pretty mad. And this sort of is the first domino that falls with the whole process of him invading Kuwait and starting the Gulf War crisis. So it's all stuff that's left over from the Cold War. The effects of the Cold War are still very much around us right now. Right now. You have a question. Hi, Shane. Hi. Tom Hanks taught me about the Russian war in Afghanistan. Oh, yeah. What is that? Charlie Wilson's War. That movie is actually a pretty good movie. I would say that it's actually not so bad as a historical starting point. If you wanted to learn more about Afghanistan and Russia's involvement in Afghanistan and how America managed to fund the Afghan war effort, Charlie Wilson's War is not the worst historically accurate movie. It is historically inaccurate in a lot of these areas, but yeah, if you are interested in that, go watch that movie. It'll give you some names to Google and some stuff to go look up. That's not the worst movie. It really isn't. And sometimes currencies could be driven by materials that would be used in guns. Do people make a living finding all these bullets after battles? Not usually. The problem in the ancient world when you have stuff like that is they don't have metal detectors. So, I mean, if you're walking around and you see them on the ground, yeah, pick them up. But otherwise, you know, you're basically having to dig up the battlefield and sift everything out, and you would have to be really, really poor to use that as a means of making money, as opposed to even doing your most basic farming. Because at the end of the day, even if you use that same amount of calories to grow food, at the end, then you still have food. So if you're going and digging up all of these bullets or guns or stuff to try to sell them, you still have to sell them to be able to get to the food step. So it's actually more labor intensive sometimes to go kind of scavenge for stuff as opposed to just trying to scratch farm in a ditch somewhere. Cold War, the Great War still having... Oh, yeah. And Tuna, you know, you've heard me say that. I'm a big proponent of World War I is so much more important than a lot of people think it is. I am a big supporter that World War I is enormously important to our modern world. We would not have had a lot of the Cold War issues had it not been for World War I. We would not have problems with countries like Iraq had it not been for World War I, because Iraq was created at the end of World War I as I'm losing my words, the mandate of not Palestine, Mesopotamia. British Mandate of Mesopotamia. So, yep. All right, ladies and gents, I think I'm about talked out. I already talked today for about 3.5 hours in class, and we've been going now for about 2 hours here, so I'm starting to feel that scratchy thing at the back of my throat, and I feel like I probably need to do a bit of a raid. So I think we're going to go kick off a raid here. And I searched for academic stuff, but I don't see anybody streaming right now that sort of sets off that alarm. So we're going to go raid one of our friends, Amanda Conda. who is a sculptor and a great Twitch streamer. So make sure that when we get there, you give Amanda Conda some love. The next time that you'll see me is on Thursday. Thursday, 1900 Central Standard Time. We're going to be starting a new phase. So this is phase 8. We're going to be looking at from 200 to 300 of the modern era. And we're going to start off, as always, over in the Far East. And we're going to talk about the Kofun period of Japan and check in on our 3 kingdoms in Korea. So really interesting stuff on Thursday night. On Saturday, at some point, this coming Saturday, we will have a History of Middle-earth stream. So be ready for that too. And keep an eyeball on the Discord. If you want to know more about what time that's going to be, I will announce that as soon as I can figure out what time it's going to be. Otherwise, we had a redemption. Our next viewer request stream is going to be History of Israel Part 2. But our Raid Cries adventure, show Amanda Conda some love, throw some of those adventure hats in the chat. Otherwise, I will see everybody on Thursday. Take it easy.